The EOS R100 Deluxe Kit comes with everything you need to take pictures underwater. You'll get the camera and the 18 to 45mm kit lens. But as far as the underwater equipment goes, let's see what's inside. Some stickers for your gear. Read through your instruction manual. We have the anti-reflection ring for the 18 to 45mm kit lens. Spare O-ring for the main back. Spare O-ring for the port. A vacuum pump that can be used with the pre-installed vacuum valve on the housing. And the housing itself. Now you'll notice when you look at the housing itself, you have the dual train handles pre-installed, you have the lever extension pre-installed, the aforementioned vacuum valve pre-installed, you also have the zoom dome port attached, and within the zoom dome port you have the gear sleeve that will let you zoom the 18 to 45mm kit lens. Before we open the housing, let's take a look at the camera and the lens. Now you're going to want to go through and make sure that you have a charged battery, you have the camera set up the way you want it for your shooting preferences, but what we will do is take the body cap off, take the rear lens cap off, align the red dots, bayonet the lens on. Make sure you don't lose your caps. Before we install the camera in the housing, let's go ahead and put the anti-reflection ring on the lens itself. And then what that's going to do is it'll prevent, as light comes through the port, you don't want it bouncing off of the letters that you'll see on the front of the lens. So this ring will actually stop that light from bouncing off the inside of the port and back into the camera. Take the anti-reflection ring, peel it off of the backing. What I like to do is grab it like so. Put that into the inside diameter of the lens itself. And then basically work it around the edge on each side until the cut opening meets the other cut opening. Simple as that. Now we're going to turn our attention to the housing itself. You can put it down onto the shade. Release the locking lever and open the lid snap on each side. Lift over the hooks, take the back, set it aside. Take the camera mount from inside. The camera mount features a 1/4-20 screw that'll go into the 1/4-20 of your camera. It also features a 1/4-20 threaded hole in case you want to put the mount while attached to the camera onto a tripod. So what you're going to want to do is align the back with the back of the camera, align the screw with the hole, and then using a flat-headed screwdriver, tighten that down. And this is the point where you're going to want to make sure it's snug, because you don't want any play between the mount and the camera. Any play between the mount and the camera will cause misalignment in the controls. So no need to over tighten it, but you do want to make sure it's relatively snug. And then at this point, the gear sleeve is pre-installed in the housing. So you don't have to install that right now. It'll all be set to go as soon as you get it out the box. And before you drop your camera in, make sure that the lens is in the shooting position by zooming it to 18. Make sure that your controls are out of the way, the on-off, front dial, and the lens release. Take the camera, take the hot shoe, it's included and installed, slide it onto the top of the camera, fully forward so that the pins make contact. Align the camera mount with the camera base in the bottom of the housing. And then press firmly in. You'll feel resistance as the friction pad goes around the lens. Push your hot shoe in, align your on-off control, You can take the time to make sure that it turns your camera on and off. Once you've ensured that all of your controls are aligned properly, you can take your back. Always check your sealing surface anytime you take your back on and off, and check your O-ring to make sure that there's no debris. This O-ring does not require any lubricant, as is a compression seal, meaning there is no friction to overcome. Place it onto the front. Take both lid snaps over the hooks, and you can simultaneously press them down. Check that they're locked. And at this point, what's really nice is that you can see the O-ring compressed all the way around because of that clear back. Check to make sure that your zoom functions and that you're able to zoom your lens. And because the Deluxe Kit comes with this vacuum valve pre-installed, we can take our vacuum pump and the included tube, simply press onto the barb. Take the other ended barb. This is the vacuum valve. Press the release button and remove the cap. Insert the barbed end, and that way you can create a vacuum inside of the housing. I recommend creating a vacuum to 10. Now, initially when you create the vacuum, check the gauge, make sure that the needle isn't dropping. If the needle's dropping initially, that means that you have a compromised seal. After a few moments and checking to say that it stays at 10, take the vacuum pump, release the barbed end, reinsert the plugged end. I'll generally do this at the beginning of the dive trip, very first part of the day. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll let this sit overnight, and then the next morning, or after 15 or 20 minutes if you don't have the luxury of being overnight, then you can reinsert the vacuum pump and you'll notice that that needle will jump right back to 10. Don't release the vacuum before you get in the water. You want to dive with this system under a vacuum. The vacuum not only ensures that you don't have any broken seals, it will reinforce all of the closing mechanisms. And that's it. That's all you need to take this housing in the water. Now, what's really cool about this system is that you don't have to be stuck with the 18 to 45mm kit lens. Let's say, for example, you wanted to shoot macro and you have the 85mm macro lens. Well, that's as simple as removing the port and replacing it with flat port, you see here. So in order to do that, we've already vacuumed the system. So let's release the vacuum. We'll take the port off and we'll replace the lens with the 85mm or replace the port with the flat port. So take your hand pump, release the cap for the valve, reinsert the barb, and gently depress the button on the bottom of the pump. You'll hear it release the vacuum. You'll also notice the needle drop. You can take your vacuum pump back out at this point. I make it a habit of always recapping the valve, because you don't want to dive without this valve installed. Go to your housing. The port's held on with 3 thumb screws. These thumb screws don't create the seal, they just keep it retained. The seal occurs when you press those 2 pieces together and the piston O-ring made the seal. Once you've loosened the 3 thumb screws, you can simply slide the port off of the front. I always tighten these 3 thumb screws back down so don't lose them. Set your zoom down port aside. Make sure you use the neoprene cover so that it stays protected. And you can remove the gear sleeve for the 18 to 45mm kit lens. It's a friction fit around the lens. Simply work it off the lens. Keep that with your dome port. Use the lens release lever. Remove the kit lens. Replace it with the 85mm macro lens. Check to make sure that you're set on full, autofocus, stabilization on. Align the red dots. Bayonet the lens onto place. In order to accommodate the 85mm, you need 2 pieces. You'll need the extension and the flat port. Using the included Icelite lubricant, remove the cap. Just a little bit in your fingertips. And then take that and simultaneously check your O-rings while you're lubricating them. You can often feel anything on an O-ring before you'll see it. and you'll also be applying lubricant. And the lubricant doesn't create the seal, it just helps overcome the friction when you put the pieces together. I also check the sealing surfaces to make sure that there's no debris there. You're going to want to make sure that the 3 thumb screws are not protruding into the inside diameter of the port. I align the thumb screws so that they're in place. And then I press that piece onto the extension. And then thumb tighten each of the thumb screws. Again, these thumb screws don't create the seal, they just keep it retained. You're going to repeat that process with this combination onto the housing itself. Again, checking, making sure you're not into the inside diameter, pressing the port onto place, and then tightening the 3 thumb screws. Repeat the vacuum process, and now you're able to shoot macro. If you have any questions about the system whatsoever, shoot us a comment down below, or feel free to email us at iclid@iclid.com.